Hello everyone, this is part 20 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Jiraiya was practically single-handedly holding off the frontal attack on the gates. The Kumo shinobi could sense his movements becoming less crisp as he fought while exhaustion began setting in. But even slightly slower attacks still massacred them. His taijutsu was swift and powerful, a single punch could kill if it struck the head or midsection. Beyond just his taijutsu, he liberally used ninjutsu that took out whole swathes of invaders. Raiten jutsu flashed through the air but failed to connect with the Godime Hokage. It wasn't only Jiraiya who was getting tired. Genma and Yugao were also breathing heavily. Genma was in a bit better shape as his attacks were primarily senbon-based. Yugao on the other hand was using her katana and she could feel the ache in her limbs. Jiraiya boy, you need to retreat. You are at your limit, soon you will drop out of sage mode. Jiraiya shook his head. He wouldn't stop, not until the village was safe. On the opposing side of the battlefield, Archoi saw the Hokage slowing down. Not even an S-class threat like him could stand up forever against waves of enemy shinobi, especially one who had just tangled with the Raikage. Knowing that Jiraiya couldn't keep him out forever, Archoi had started stripping Jonin from the advancing waves of Kumo shinobi attacking the Hokage. He now had a dozen Jonin ready to go and would strike when the time was right. The honor of killing a Kage would be his. The elite Jonin gave a smile at the situation and thought about his sister. If he could kill a Kage and she could kill the Fire Daimyo, there would be stories about their legend for generations. I'm coming for you soon, Hokage. Break. The Raikage streaked across the battlefield. His speed was legendary, and with that superhuman speed came power that made him the greatest taijutsu user in the world. Like he had done on the left flank and in the center, he would cut through the Konoha line and allow his shinobi access into his enemy's stronghold. Up ahead he saw why his shinobi hadn't made any progress. Guy and Tsunade were there holding the line. They were both ferociously skilled hand-to-hand combatants. Judging from the amount of blood on them and the number of his loyal shinobi dead at their feet, they had caused the lion's share of the casualties. Guy dipped his head a fraction, allowing the katana to miss by an inch. He retaliated with a devastating fist to the chest that made the enemy shinobi fly backwards 20 feet. He sensed the approach of the Raikage and instantly knew his current level of power and speed would simply not be enough. The green-clad elite Jonin instantly accessed the Hachiman 8 gate and opened the 6th gate. The Kaiman gate of view allowed massive increases in strength and speed, and at the same time it granted the benefits of the early gates, which refreshed his stamina. His skin turned red and power radiated around him. Shimmering with power, Guy rushed forward and intercepted the Raikage. The Raikage had been aiming for Tsunade and almost didn't see the flash of green and red before it was on him. He pivoted and blocked the powerful fist. The forceful collision shoved both of them back a few feet. The Raikage recovered slightly faster than Guy and rushed back in, delivering a powerful elbow to Guy's chest, or it would have if Guy hadn't shoved it aside at the last moment. Tsunade's eyes widened at the speed that they were fighting at. She could keep track of their movements, but in a hand-to-hand fight she would have been decimated by either one of them. Granted, she could heal herself from almost all wounds that weren't instantly fatal, so the battle wouldn't have been a foregone conclusion, but it would have been a very painful test. Asuma and Neji were panting heavily. They, Tenten and the few remaining Konoha shinobi wouldn't be able to stem the tide now that Guy was busy with the Raikage. Tsunade knew she would have to increase her participation in the fight. She used her Byakugo no Jutsu, strength of 100 seal, and allowed the chakra to flow freely over her body. With it she flashed through the hand seals for Kuchio's no Jutsu, summoning technique. Katsuyu, the great slug of Shikotsu Forest, appeared in front of Tsunade and in front of the attacking Kumo shinobi. The Kumo shinobi immediately struck out at the great slug summon. Though their attacks seemed to cause damage, Tsunade knew that it would take far more to defeat Katsuyu. Katsuyu began her contribution to the battle with Zeshi Nensen, tongue-tooth sticky acid. A mass of highly corrosive acid splattered over the attacking Kumo shinobi. Where it struck, death took only moments. The acid could melt stone. Flesh stood little chance of surviving that. Guy and the Raikage continued their battle, ignoring the towering slug and the attacking Kumo shinobi. The Raikage was still faster, and this led to him being able to get more strikes in. However, even with Guy being slower, he managed to avoid damage to his body by expertly blocking or moving with the blow to mitigate the damage. The Raikage was impressed with Konoha's taijutsu expert. At equal speed and strength, Guy would have destroyed him in combat. However, as good as Guy was, the Raikage was still faster, and he was surrounded by his Raiten no Yoroi, lightning release armor. Though the Raikage had chakra reserves that equaled a Jinchuriki, even he was starting to tire from the multiple battles he had participated in. I have to finish him off soon. I still have to deal with Tsunade and Jiraiya. The Raikage blitzed forward over and over, refusing to even entertain a taijutsu battle. It was just raw speed pummeling the green-clad elite shinobi. Tsunade was busy aiding her summon, and while Asuma tried to assist Guy, his thrown chakra blade was easy to dodge with the speeds that the leader of Kumo was moving at. Guy had no choice but to try to match the Raikage's speed, and that meant opening another gate. With a loud cry, he opened up Kyomen, Gate of Wonder. The Raikage faltered for a moment as blue energy radiated from Konoha's green beast. Guy exploded into motion and launched a devastating kick at the Raikage. The Raikage blocked but lost his footing and was sent barreling with lethal force through two of his own shinobi. Guy had a limit to how long he could maintain this level of power. Every second would do more damage to his body. With little time to dally, Guy dashed forward after the Raikage. Break. As befitting his station, Homura had not been asked to fight. But as the battle for Konoha raged and more shinobi were pulled from the reserves and thrust into battle, he grew restless. This was his home, and it was his people that were bleeding. When word came that the Chushikage had allied himself with the Kumo force, it was the final straw. Homura walked away from the shelters and armed himself. He joined a band of shinobi who were rushing to reinforce the Hokage. Homura had not gone on a mission in years and had not held a weapon in battle since the Kyuubi attack 15 years ago. But he was a Jonin who had fought beside the Nadaime Hokage. With grim determination, he kept pace with the half-dozen four-man squads that had been sent to the main gates. So few, things must be dire if Ibiki-san isn't sending more. Break. What Onoki was not aware of was that the Yamanaka clan head had used a very subtle jutsu that caused its victims to become more angry and more impetuous. So when Shikaku taunted him with the death of his son and probable death of his granddaughter, there was likely only going to be one response. What Onoki was not aware of was that Onoki, enraged, was terrifyingly powerful. 6. Dosekiru, Earth style, Earth Dragon, simultaneously rose up from the ground around the wrathful Chushikage. The dragons made of rock slammed through buildings and nearly crushed Onoki in his hiding place. Shikaku, who was having his own troubles dodging the powerful earth golems, suddenly had a new problem to worry about. Only a Kawarimi at that very last split second prevented him from being smashed between the two. Choza was the only one who dealt with the threat directly by increasing his size and smashing a pair of the earthen dragons away with his staff. Onoki was far from done, and with a single hand seal used Doton, Doryuso, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears, underneath Choza's feet. The large man was surprised by the suddenness of the attack and couldn't fully get out of the way and suffered severe puncture wounds in his calf and on his feet. The Nara clan head gave a coded shout to his companions as he tossed a poison gas bomb at Onoki. The gas never got near him as an earthen wall sprang up to block the deadly projectile. The Akamiki clan patriarch swiftly ate a capsule that contained the Horingan, green spinach pill, and the Karagan, yellow curry pill. A corona of pale blue chakra flickered behind Choza as he charged forward and smashed an earth golem and a mud wall to pieces without even slowing down. Sensing the danger but unwilling to retreat, Onoki flickered through the hand seals and sent out a stream of superheated fire. Incredibly, Choza did not veer or hesitate for a moment as he pushed his arms out in front of him and let the flames burn them. The Nara clan head dashed in behind the Choza-sized hole and sent his shadow flying ahead. Even in his enraged state, Onoki had expected this, and as he fell back from the charging Choza, he simultaneously forged the chakra needed for his most powerful attack. Jinten, Genkai Hikuri no Jutsu, Dust Release, Atomic Dismantling Jutsu, sprang to life in a massive cube covering Choza and Shikaku. Nara had a flash of panic as he thought their plan had failed. However, he then instantly realized that if he had time to even think, it must have been a success. The chakra died down around Choza and Shikaku, and he knew that Onoki had been successful. The plan from the beginning was to use Choza as a distraction. Shikaku knew that Onoki would realize this, but just as the rock clone that had been stabbed by Ebisu had cleared one layer of genjutsu but not the second, he had failed to realize that Shikaku was also a distraction. The real attack had come from Onoki. A war now raged in the mind of the Chushikage as Onoki's Shintenshin no Jutsu, mind-body switch technique, took hold. Against a lesser Yamanaka, the powerful chakra and experience of his victim would have made the attack a failure. However, he was the clan head for a reason and he only needed to hold it for a few seconds. Shikaku swiftly tossed Onoki a small pellet that was actually a near-instantaneous acting poison that was surrounded with a small layer of chakra paper. As soon as it was swallowed, it acted in less than a half a second as the paper flaked off. Onoki forced Onoki to catch the pellet, slip it into his mouth and swallow. At that exact moment he exited from the oldest living Kage's mind. Any damage done to Onoki would have also done the same to Onoki. By using a wrap pill, it gave Onoki just enough time to exit before the physiological effects of the pill would occur. Onoki tried to attack as soon as he regained control of his limbs, but by then it was too late and his body and mind shut down. He twitched for a few moments and then lay still. The Sandaime Chushikage had passed from the world. Break. Darui had expected an easier time after breaching Konoha's defenses. Yes, they were fighting on their home ground, but he had hoped their strong outer defense had left a relatively weaker inner force. The force was weaker, but streets had been trapped and the defenders harassed their march quite effectively. Chasing after pairs of shinobi using those accursed kunai scrolls led to more losses as they fell victim to poisonous gas, explosions and ambushes. He had even suffered a close call when a massive explosion blew apart the building he was fighting on. He knew if he left the battle to go find the wreckage, the hundreds of shinobi behind him would suffer atrocious losses. Instead, he gamely continued and hoped he would find C or Fuyu and send them to check on their leader. Before he could do more searching in between fights, a strong resistance gathered in the streets. The buildings near the gathered Konoha shinobi were probably death traps. They could try to take their time to clear them, but that would prove costly as the hit-and-run attacks would be incessant. Kumo could not use their superior numbers in this fight either, as there was only room for about 4 to 5 shinobi to fight in the artificially enclosed area. Darui eyed the opponents and saw that Hiashi Hyuga was at their head. Raiten Jutsu will just be deflected with Kaiten, a tough nut to crack. Wearily Darui unsheathed his blade. Kenjutsu beat Taijutsu, but against a master of the Juken, Gentle Fist, that maxim would be put to the test. He could feel the weight of the Byakugan stare. Hiashi hated Kumogakure, and for good reason. Darui picked up his pace and raced toward the head of Konoha's most powerful clan. Break. Jiraiya had just finished killing 2 Kumo shinobi with a vicious taijutsu assault when he felt sudden weakness overtake him. Ma and Pa gave out a cry as Jiraiya dropped out of sage mode. His chakra was at near terminal levels, and since Ma and Pa had been summoned, they both dissipated back to their home. The Kumo shinobi were quick to pounce, eager to bring down the enemy leader. Archoi couldn't have asked for a better chance and gave the signal that sent the Jonin in. Given Jiraiya's S-class stamina and reserves, a chakra pill wasn't going to do much, but he still swallowed one and felt some of his energy return. Genma blew out the last of his senbon at the assaulting Kumo shinobi and pulled out a kunai to go in up close and personal. The first 3 Kumo shinobi were on Jiraiya in a heartbeat. Kenjutsu specialists, all of them, they forced the Hokage to duck and weave between their blades. The Hokage didn't want to use the Rasengan due to the amount of chakra it required, so he settled for delivering a strong kick to one Cloud Nin's midsection and deflecting a sword strike with a kunai that he pulled out of his sleeve. Years of experience allowed him to avoid the slicing blades and deal damage to the enemy in return. However, it wasn't looking good. There were more than 3 Jonin attacking and there were dozens more Chunin on their heels. Genma managed to surprise one of the Jonin with an unexpected kawarimi. As his katana-wielding opponent turned, the senbon aficionado plunged his kunai into his spine. Yugao was forced back by a pair of Kumo shinobi, one wielding a long blade and the other lashing out with Raiten Jutsu. The combination of the two kept her on her toes and in a defensive posture. Jiraiya accepted another slash to his shoulder in order to drive his stiffened fingers into his opponent's throat. The attack instantly collapsed his windpipe and he died choking. But even though he had taken down 2 of his attackers, more sprang into place and he was simply too worn down to counter effectively. A lightning clone dissipated from a kick, momentarily electrocuting the Toad Sage. A third shinobi stabbed him deep in the side, delivering a painful wound that would eventually cause him to bleed out if it wasn't attended to. Archoi chose that moment to strike and let loose with a superheated thin line of fire aimed directly at the Hokage's chest. Genma didn't have to think twice as he defended his Hokage the only way he had left. His Kawarimi interposed himself with the jet of fire. At the same time he tossed his kunai directly at the Kumo nin who had stabbed Jiraiya. The flame lanced into Genma's body, killing him. It stopped the flames however, and at the same time Genma's kunai cut deep into the Kenjutsu specialist next to Jiraiya. The distraction was enough for Jiraiya to recover and finish off two of the Jonin who had vexed him. Archoi was pissed that his attack hadn't finished it, but became even more upset when he saw reinforcements had finally arrived. An old man was leading a score of Konoha shinobi. No matter, it won't be enough. The Kaiten specialist wasn't going to leave things to chance. He blazed forward and drew his own blade. He would kill the wounded Hokage himself. Homura charged into battle and used Magen, Narakumi no Jutsu, demonic illusion, hell viewing technique. While it was a low-level genjutsu, it was also easily used, and the greater the user's skill the more devastating the effect. The Kumo shinobi he targeted were battling Yugao, and it only caused them to falter for a moment. But that was all the Konoha Kenjutsu specialist needed, as she decapitated one and thrust into the other. Jiraiya staggered back, nearly collapsing from the combination of his wounds, chakra exhaustion and his latest exertion. Archoi's first attack was narrowly avoided. The second strike sliced into his arm, almost to the bone. The third strike was intercepted by Yugao. Homura flashed through the hand seals necessary for Doton, Doruheiki, Earth Release, Mud Wall, and poured extra chakra into it, making it extend out further than normal. While Raiten had a natural advantage over Doton, it was typically used to pierce a specific point, not break down an entire wall. Get the Hokage to safety. Now. The elderly shinobi thundered. Half off the Chunin obeyed. A pair picked their leader up by the arms and leapt away from the battle. The rest gave a battle cry filled with Hai no Ishi, Wall of Fire, and threw themselves at the invaders. Yugao and Archoi exchanged stroke and counter-stroke. Archoi had found a worthy opponent at the wrong time. He desperately wanted to rush past her and go after the real prize, but her blade would not let him pass. The purple-haired Kunoiki pushed hard against Archoi's blade, forcing him back a step before she sprung back herself and created two cage bunshin. The blades seemed to swirl together as she and they danced forward using Mikazuki no Mai, crescent moon dance. Archoi put up a blistering defense against the attacks and dispelled one of the shadow clones. The sheer skill and power of the attack however cost him his right arm. He screamed as Yugao moved to finish him off with a vertical strike that would have bifurcated him. However, the Konoha defenders were outnumbered and two of his comrades came in and deflected the blow. Archoi's dreams of killing a Kage were shattered as he was forced to retreat and be treated by a medical nin with all haste before he bled out. He watched as they pulled Jiraiya to safety while the Konoha shinobi were being overwhelmed with sheer numbers. Walls of earth and stone rose up, blocking the invaders again. Homura shouted over the fray, "Anbu-san, stay with the Hokage." Yugao hesitated for a second but then obeyed, rushing after Jiraiya. Homura used the last of his chakra to throw Doton Jutsu. Wall after wall was put up interspersed with spears jutting from the earth itself. He held the attackers for a full minute before he collapsed, his chakra all but utterly spent. On the ground he looked up at who would be killing him. A Kumo shinobi stood over him and stabbed down into his back. His last thought was one of contentment. He had served his village in one last battle. As the blade pierced his back and punctured his lungs, he keyed the explosive seals that he had previously adhered to his body before he rushed out to help the reserve forces. The explosions killed him and took out one last enemy of Konoha. Break. Darui was breathing heavily. Hiashi had been no easy foe. The clan head had moved with practiced skill and had been nearly impossible to pin down. His chitin stopped every blow. Finally Darui had fainted and triggered the chitin, and once the rotation had stopped he had dangerously used a shunshin at near point-blank range and sliced out with his blade as he moved past. His blade had sliced into the man's eyes and that had changed the tone of the fight completely. Half-blinded, his opponent was unable to react in time, and Darui had sliced and diced parts of his flesh every time he was a fraction of a second too slow to begin his rotation. The Hyuga had died with a curse on his lips. Darui apologized to his corpse and moved on. He didn't have time to dwell on the death, he had a battle to win. Now finally at long last the resistance was broken. Traps still lined the possible routes but there was no sign of strong resistance. When it became clear the walls had been breached and 1,000 shinobi were inside without a force left to stop them, Konoha would quit the field and flee. He acknowledged that much depended on the fate of the Leaf's S-class shinobi, but even they should be close to chakra exhaustion at this point. His plans were finally coming together. It had come at a horrific cost, however. But Darui had not yet won. Less than a minute later he and his forces were assaulted by an army of Cage Bunshin. It only took a light hit to cause the Bunshin to dissipate, but these shadow clones were moving at elite Jonin speed. Darui watched in horror as 100 of the speedy creations ripped into his army. The Raikage's right-hand man countered with his own Raiten Jutsu, sending out lightning in a broad arc, but it was countered by the clones using Futon Jutsu. Naruto Namikaze had entered the battle with all the force of a mighty hurricane. The real Naruto was right behind his clones. He quickly created another 100 clones and prepared to clash with the third most deadly shinobi of Kumogakur. But he would not fight the battle alone, as Sakura was right behind and ready to use Genjutsu or Fuinjutsu as the situation called for. The others had been sent off with another band of Naruto clones to other parts of the battle. It would be up to Team 7 to deal with Darui and the Kumo Nin who had broken through. Darui called out, "When I didn't see clones manning the walls I assumed you were out dealing with a Wagakur. Is Hatake with you too?" Naruto smiled at the attempt to gather information. He wasn't going to play those games with such a dangerous opponent. In a flash he made one of his senjutsu-filled clones pop and instantly became filled with nature chakra. His eyes changed and his body was filled with vitality despite the long run he had just completed. Darui was a bit surprised that the boy had learned senjutsu like the Hokage. It would make him even more dangerous. Darui opened up with Ranten, Riza Sakusu, Storm Release, Laser Circus. The destructive blasts of energy dissipated themselves on a purple barrier that had sprung up in front of Naruto. When Daru's jutsu was spent, Naruto blazed forward at speeds Darui had only seen from the Raikage or Killer Bee. Darui sliced at the last Namikaze, who parried with a kunai and kicked out, catching Darui in the ribs and sending him crashing into a building. That kick hurt more than the Great Toads. Without hand seals, Darui created a Raiten clone and then used Kawarimi and suppressed his chakra. If he couldn't deal with the boy head one, he would use the shinobi art of stealth and misdirection. As intelligent as Darui was, he was ignorant about some of the facts of Sage Mode. Naruto never lost track of him due to his enhanced senses. Naruto literally blew away the clone with Futon, Daytopper, Wind Release, Great Breakthrough, but kept his senses focused on the real Darui. The master of the Storm Release used the Howling Wind as cover to dash in and strike down Naruto. Kakashi's student instead met the attack with a Futon, Shinkujin, Wind Release, Vacuum Blade. Since he did not have his chakra blade due to it shattering with the fight against Itachi, he created his own with chakra. The sudden attack caught Darui off guard and he had to parry the oncoming wind blade instead of continuing his attack. Darui saw Naruto fall back and suck in a great quantity of air. He intended to use a Kawarimi to escape the imminent windstorm, but at the very last instant felt the tendril of foreign chakra within his system. In horror he realized he was in a genjutsu and overloaded his tenketsu points with chakra, disrupting the attack. But it was too late. Naruto was not 10 feet away preparing a powerful Futon jutsu. He was instantly in Daru's face, thrusting his wind blade into his chest. Failure was something Darui had never known, but as his heart was torn to pieces he felt it keenly. Naruto looked down on the fallen shinobi. "You know, Sakura, if you weren't here this would have been a really hard fight." Sakura gave her partner a warm smile. "We're Team 7. I'll always be there to watch your back, Naruto-kun." Naruto grinned at the additional kun added to his name and used a shunshin to throw himself into the thick of the army of Kumo shinobi trying to fight his clones. Break. With the 7th gate open, Guy had every edge in their battle. He already was the more skilled in taijutsu, but now he had strength and speed that surpassed the Raikage. The only thing that kept the Raikage alive was his Raiten no Yoroi, lightning release armor. And even that had its limits. Every devastating blow and spine-crushing kick that the armor protected him from drained a massive chunk of chakra. If he had the chakra of an average jonin, the first 2 blows would have finished it. But since he had chakra that was equivalent to that of a tailed beast, he survived the unstoppable barrage. The Raikage moved fully into defensive mode. He backed up instead of striking out. He dodged instead of blocked. He created separation every chance he got. The Raikage was outmatched currently, but if he could hold on, the price of the gates would give him the victory. Guy felt his body protesting and his muscles being ripped to shreds. He had to end it now before the power of the gates left him a broken mess. Guy feinted with a kick that then turned it into a sweep and an elbow to the chest, pinning the Raikage to the ground. In a split second he jumped up and at a point-blank range used Hirudora, Daytime Tiger. With nothing but the power of condensed air from his ferocious punch, the shockwave slammed into the Raikage with immense power. The blast crushed the Raikage into the earth and the ground exploded outward in all directions. The lethal pressure killed Shinobi too close to the fight and continued on into the walls of Konoha. Tsunade had kept an eye on the fight and saw what was about to happen. She had reacted and called for her summon to interpose herself between them and the blast. Lady Katsuyu obeyed and took the blast head-on, protecting Neji, Tenten, Asuma and her mistress. The walls of Konoha, even with the dispersal seals, couldn't fully contain the massive shockwave and cracked in a few places as they shuddered. Scores of Kumo shinobi had been pulped by the blast and the giant slug had taken significant damage to her flesh, but those who she had sheltered were safe. The Raikage felt his chakra levels drop to their lowest point since childhood. His armor crackled around him, barely maintaining its shape. He gazed up from the crater he was laying in at Maito Guy, the world's greatest taijutsu master. The green beast of Konoha was a near unstoppable force. But now that force was spent. The aura around him was fading and he was breathing heavily, trying to drink in air. You are strong, Guy. It was an honor to have fought you, but this is the end. Your village must fall. Guy looked to the sunset. He was straining to stand upright. Tsunade might be able to get to him and carry on the battle with the Raikage. But there was still an army and the Chushikage was still ravaging his village. The flames of youth still burned brightly in his veins. He had more to teach his precious Lee. But now, before the sun set on his youthful vigor, it was time for him to showcase the true climax of the springtime of youth. The Raikage looked on with horror as Guy stabbed himself with his own thumb in the chest and opened Shimon, Gate of Death. A flaming aura of red steam billowed around Guy as his body reached the absolute height of human potential. The Raikage stood stunned at what he was seeing. The Raikage instantly put his hands up, crossing them over his front, realizing that Guy's next attack could very well kill him. Moving at a speed that the Raikage could not even begin to follow, Guy appeared behind the Raikage and lashed out with Sekizo, Evening Elephant. The first of 5 blows punched the Raikage with enough force to send him flying at a speed that ruptured the sound barrier. But before he even moved 2 inches, the next punch crashed into him. And the next, and then the final 2 punches in even less time than it had taken the first. A vacuum of pressurized air added even more damage to the Raikage's rate and defense. The Raikage tumbled hundreds of feet as his jutsu failed him. His body was utterly spent and he could just barely lift up his head and see Guy's next and ultimate attack. Guy was naked as his clothes had long since been burned to a crisp. Red cracks arced over his skin as it began to melt and fall off his body. Agony beyond comprehension was ignored by the noble green beast of Konoha. Blazing forward, he put his all into the final kick of his life, the forbidden taijutsu Yagai, Night Guy. The speed of the attack distorted space around him and the descending strike took on the shape of a dragon's head. The attack ended the Raikage. The terrifying force of the blow vaporized his skin before even connecting, and once it did connect, the shockwave liquefied his organs and shattered every bone in his body. Mercifully, the attack happened with such blinding speed the Raikage was dead before even feeling it. Guy's leg shattered in the process, and Tsunade, who was watching with a heavy heart, was glad that the attack was pointed away from Konoha. The earth groaned in agony as Guy's kick created a tsunami of earth that buried hundreds of Kumo shinobi. Guy lay there smiling at the sunset as his body turned to ash and blew into the wind. In the remaining few minutes of Sage Mode, Naruto devastated the Kumo shinobi. The speed and force of his attacks were devastating. This was cage-level power, smashing through primarily Chunin opponents. Sakura wasn't idle either. Her genjutsu was not used to distract opponents from her teammates' attack. Unlike with Darui, these shinobi could not defend themselves against the Namika's onslaught. Instead, her techniques caused Kumo shinobi to fight each other. Blood ran down the streets of Konoha as they killed scores of shinobi in the span of those few minutes. While Senjutsu enhanced Naruto was the main killer, his clones helped out significantly. Kumo's shinobi were perhaps fighting their worst possible opponent. Kenjutsu specialized shinobi lost to the clone's superior speed. Raiten ninjutsu was countered by the clone's futon abilities. A massacre was occurring, and with Darui defeated, the attacking shinobi broke and ran. The retreat wasn't an all-out flight. It was orderly, and several brave Kumo nin stood defiantly to try to slow down the slaughter while their comrades ran. Naruto saw them off by creating another 50 clones and had them give chase. Naruto felt clones pop from further within Konoha. He turned to Sakura and said, "Pervy Sage is hurt and Ibiki has called the last of the reserves to help fend off the shinobi who burst through our central gate. They are our next target." Sakura nodded, and they were off to help another part of the battlefield. Break. The shinobi who had witnessed the death of their Reikage were shell-shocked. Some were simply stunned into inaction. Others fell to their knees in despair. Konoha had taken away the cage. Tsunade marched out of the walls of Konoha and shouted out in a strong voice, "I am Tsunade Senju. Your most powerful shinobi has been killed. Hundreds if not thousands of your comrades are dead because of this foolhardy attack. Leave this land and you will live. Or you can face me and die." Her killing intent erupted. Her anger at the loss of a man who had a wall of fire that had literally turned him to ashes gave strength to that killing intent. Some ran in terror while others froze, rooted in place. Most, however, simply backed away. Their Reikage was dead, and one of the Sanins stood before them. Their other S-class asset was on the other side of the battlefield. Perhaps it was best to withdraw for now. Orders were given, and the Kumo shinobi backed away from Konoha as messages went out to the other parts of the battlefield. As correspondence went back and forth, it was soon learned that the entire left side of the attack on Konoha had been shattered. Darui was dead and Team 7 had arrived. Several of the Jonin tried to figure out who was still alive to take command now that the Reikage and his strong right arm were dust in the wind. Archoi was one of the few of the Reikage's inner circle that was still alive, and he was badly wounded. He was missing an arm and had lost a considerable amount of blood. He was aware enough to relay orders. It was time to retreat. While they had been close to breaking Konoha, they simply had no one left to reliably take on the likes of Tsunade or Naruto. Numbers were still technically in their favor, but casualties had been atrocious. More than half of the shinobi who had come to destroy Konohagakure were dead. The sun had set, and in the darkness the Kumo shinobi slinked away like beaten dogs, utterly demoralized and defeated. Break. Samui had marched her army and would strike at the Fire Daimyo's seat of power on that very night. Another night of treachery, betrayal and further losses would only weaken them. Hundreds of shinobi would not be able to participate in the fight, and over 1,000 of the Lightning Daimyo's soldiers were in the same situation. But now the city was before them. No great wall surrounded it like Konoha due to its size. It was the most populous city in Hai no Kuni. Today she would bring it to its knees and cripple the country that housed Konohagakure. Because she was wary about traps, she sent in the Lightning Daimyo's soldiers in first. To some it would seem to be cruel to throw away lives like that, but this was war, and losing her best fighters would be foolish. The soldiers marched into the city and were attacked by shinobi who ruthlessly cut them down. It wasn't so much a fight as it was a slaughter. Samui was troubled by the fact that there hadn't seemed to be any traps trigger. Had the Konoha forces been too busy harassing her army to plan for the defense? She was unsure of the best course of action, and in the interim more soldiers died to the relatively small amount of shinobi facing them. Finally she decided to send in her shinobi. Word reached her shortly afterward that the enemy ninja had melted back into the city. Her forces probed deeper into the city and began squaring off against the Fire Daimyo's soldiers. It was the enemy's turn to be slaughtered. Things were progressing well, and the enemy didn't seem to be able to mount a significant resistance. Maybe they opted to flee with the royals and let the city fall. Disastrous to their economy, but they would still have leadership over their country. And then explosions rocked the earth and plumes of fire roared up from the city, signaling the death of scores of loyal Kumo shinobi. She had been wrong. They were not abandoning the city. They were going to fight tooth and nail and use every filthy trick they could to kill the invading army, even if they destroyed half the city with it. Break. Danzo knew that the best moment to strike was when confusion and uncertainty were at its peak. As the flames devoured soldier and shinobi alike, he unleashed his futon jutsu to fan the flames into the face of the invaders. The firestorm roared out of control within the city just as he had planned. At the same time, his elite root forces were striking down the shinobi who were not hit by the fiery flames. They were led by Sai and his Choju Giga, super beast imitating drawing, that summoned a small army of deadly animals. Behind him were his elites Torun and Fu. One had his Kikaichu that would lead to a shinobi's death with just a touch, and the other was more than a little skilled with a blade. The three and the rest of Root behind them cut down the surprised Kumo Nin who had been butchering the fire daimyo's soldiers. After causing the fire to spread even further, Danzo played his next card. Kuchio's no Jutsu, summoning technique. The massive Baku appeared and immediately added his own considerable strength to Root. The massive beast with its razor-sharp tiger claws could crush and slash with impunity. To make matters even worse, his ability to manipulated wind chakra made their rate and attacks practically worthless. Danzo himself entered the fray with a vitality that belied his age. His speed with his wind-powered blade was impressive. Even against shinobi who were experienced with kenjutsu, his skill was disturbing. A man of his age simply should not have been capable of moving so fast. The leader of Root didn't change his outward expression, but he knew he had Hashirama's cells to thank for his endurance and spryness. Without them he would still be able to fight, but not at the elite Jonin level he was currently using. The 6 Guardian Shinobi under the command of Chi and Akamaiki also attacked in the confusion. Novices did not make Guardian Shinobi, and they too played a part in the massacre of the Kumo Shinobi. The city had turned into a slaughterhouse for the invading army. Break. The level-headed commander of the invasionary force was close to losing her cool. By all accounts, the force that had gone into the city was now being slaughtered without mercy by Konoha's Anbu. A massive summon that she wasn't even aware Konoha had access to was rampaging, and hundreds of loyal shinobi lay dead. The daimyo's soldiers were breaking, and defeat loomed if something wasn't done. Omoi, Karui, you two are with me. We are dealing with a small number of elite shinobi. Once we take care of them, the rest of the army can finish the job. Karui acknowledged the order with a grim look. It was hell on earth inside the city. Omoi on the other hand replied with, but what if we make matters worse? What if a surprise attack is just waiting for the troops out here? We could be playing right into. Samui silenced him with a look. There was no time for his usual antics. The three raced into the burning city. Their first opponent was obviously of Akamaiki descent, as he towered above the buildings and lay waste around him with a massive war hammer. A very un-shinobi-like weapon, Samui thought as she drew her tanto. Her team operated flawlessly, demonstrating why the Raikage had entrusted them with this secondary objective. While Omoi distracted the massive giant with a flashy Raiten ninjutsu, Karui cut through the back of his knee with a vicious swipe. Chien bellowed and crashed into the ground. Despite the suddenness of the attack and the fact that he was falling backward, he still managed to strike out with his hammer and nearly splattered Karui. However, with that weapon now out of the way, it meant the already in motion Samui had easy access to bury her tanto into his neck, finishing the leader of the Shugonin Junichi, 12 Guardian Ninja. Around them they saw the bodies of countless Kumo shinobi as well as several other Guardian shinobi that were identifiable by their sashes. Before they could begin to advance further, they had to dodge away from a swarm of air bullets that shattered the earth all around them. The man the Raikage had once called the true snake of Konoha was before them. Samui, I trust you have enjoyed your march through Hai no Kuni. This is the man responsible for all the hardship my shinobi and the soldiers faced. This is the man that makes even a cage weary. Keeping her legendary cool, she calmly prepared herself. Shall we? The old man's voice was mocking. She gave a nod, and as one team Samui struck out at the shinobi no Yami, the shinobi of darkness. Break. Fuyu used her skill as an infiltration specialist to escape the village intact. She had wanted to keep searching for her brother's torturer, but she had obligations. Getting out had been difficult, but she had been successful when darkness fell. She sought out who was in command and learned it had been Archoi, who was now unconscious. He was being treated by the medical nin for blood loss. Fuyu quickly brought herself up to speed with the situation. The news was grim. Over half of their invasionary force was dead or missing. The Raikage was dead. Darui was dead. Konoha still stood strong before them. While they had killed a great many Leaf Shinobi, only one of the S-class threats were dead. This boded quite poorly for the continued war effort. The latest word from Samui was that she was attacking the capital in a night assault. The attack would be underway at the moment, and it would be critical for it to succeed. Konoha had a large portion of their shinobi within the city as well as most of the village's elite, which hopefully meant the fire daimyo was poorly guarded. With a sigh she said, "Get the wounded ready. We need to get out of Hai no Kuni. Send a message to Samui's force to do as much damage as she can and to cripple the city before retreating back with us to Kumo. Once Konoha has licked their wounds, they will attack with a vengeance. We must be ready. And ready they would need to be. A new cage would have to be selected, and the obvious choice was now dead. And once that cage was selected, he or she would have to craft a winning strategy against Konoha. There will be more chances in this war, Mitarashi. I'll cross blades with you if it is the last thing I do. Break. Zetsu reported the news to Pain, the nominal leader of the Akatsuki. Pain was greatly displeased to learn of Han's passing. Their plan would be years delayed now. And Itachi dying was also surprising. Pain had been warned about Itachi's odd behavior by Madara, but the near-flawless shinobi's death was still counted as a shock. After Zetsu left, Madara made an appearance. I am disappointed as well. The remaining Jinchuriki must be captured and secured quickly so this type of disaster does not occur again. Pain watched Madara with his Rinnegan. The man had been responsible for putting Pain on this path, and his counsel was appreciated. The 8 tails will be easier to obtain than the 9 tails. The others will gather the 6 tails in short order. I will personally deal with the Hachibi and then the Kyubi. Madara shook his head. A fine plan except for the Kyubi. Do not underestimate him or his sensei. Even the Rinnegan could give no clues about Madara's emotions. And yet Pain sensed a rare disquieting hesitation behind the orange mask Madara wore. If it were anyone else, Pain would have thought it was fear. Obito, who was the man behind the mask of Madara, was in fact feeling a tendril of that fear. He too was disappointed about the setback in their plans, but he worried about a direct encounter with Kakashi, his old teammate. Kakashi was a shinobi that only ever revealed the power needed to complete the mission. How strong was he truly? Since Rin and Minato had died, he had yet to fail a single mission. He had fought against overwhelming odds and faced down S-class opponents and always lived to tell the tale. Outside of chakra exhaustion, he didn't take significant injuries. Pain himself would not be enough to take on Team 7. It wasn't just Kakashi but also the rest of his team. They were this generation's Sannin, and put together with their genius sensei they were all but unstoppable. He would have to think about how they would have to be dealt with. A frontal assault, even with the power Pain wielded, would likely be met with total failure. If the 6 paths of Pain failed, it would be time to bring back the real Madara. But Obito was not ready to play second fiddle yet. Pain is prideful, but if he were open to letting the rest of the Akatsuki assist, that should be enough. Pain had remained quiet after Madara's warning. Obito spoke again. Go, bring back the 8 tails and we will discuss how to best handle the Kyubi after. Break. Team Samui did an all-out blitz against Danzo. Omoi did not use Raiten Jutsu this time due to seeing their opponent utilize Futon Jutsu earlier. Instead he joined Samui and Karui in an all-Kenjutsu onslaught. When faced with 3 attackers, the logical move was to move toward one opponent and attack them while moving away from the others. If one was skilled and quick enough, he could even the odds before the other 2 could flank him. Danzo did not do this. He stayed perfectly stationary as Omoi struck first. Danzo parried the blade with his own futon-generated one. Karui came in a fraction of a second later and thrust Danzo through the gut with her katana. With his free hand, Danzo grabbed her arm and then stabbed his wind blade into her body. Samui hadn't expected Danzo to get stabbed by Karui, but was close enough to push the wind blade away from a fatal wound on her subordinate. Instead, the wind chakra slashed through Karu's shoulder instead of her heart. Samui earned an elbow to the nose for her troubles, and Omoi took the opening to slash into Danzo's side. Samui and Karui were injured, with Karui being far more damaged by the attack, but they had done it. They had killed the bastard. Or so they thought. Danzo had actually used a Zanagi to completely erase all the damage, turning illusion into reality. Appearing unharmed, he instantly used Futon, Shinkua, Wind Release, Vacuum Wave. Blades of wind sang through the air, cutting at all 3 of the enemy Jonin. Samui flattened herself to the ground to avoid the waves of air while Omoi tried to deflect with his blade. He was only partially successfully in the endeavor, as the wind currents weren't made of one solid substance. If a 3-foot wave of wind was cut, it would cause the chakra to dissipate somewhat, but at the edges the wind current could still cut. His forehead, arm and leg were all cut in the attack. Karui, already wounded and still shocked at Danzo disappearing, failed to stop the attack and her jugular was sliced open. As Karui bled out, Samui dashed forward, leading with her Tanto. Danzo was impressed with her kenjutsu and could see why she was given command of the Kumo Nin attacking the capital. Her strikes were deadly and precise and were a perfect representation of the Kumogakur kenjutsu style. Omoi on the other hand had rushed over to Karu's side in an attempt to save her. He cauterized the gaping slash in her neck and then shoved a plasma pill into her mouth, but it was all for naught. Karui died and Omoi had lost his teammate. Danzo hadn't expected to have to lose a second Sharinganai, but with the numbers still against his force he needed to be done with his current opponents sooner rather than later. Danzo didn't block the next strike, instead he stabbed forward right as she slashed at his midsection. His futon-powered blade did not strike flesh as Simui had backed off of her attack after seeing what had happened earlier in the fight. Danzo now had the edge in the fight as Simui would only deliver a killing blow if she couldn't be attacked in return. This allowed Danzo to cease to worry about defense and just focus on powering through her guard. Omoi re-entered the battle and Danzo lunged forward against Simui, forcing her to back away. Danzo then turned and slashed down at the oncoming Omoi, who was now focusing on revenge, not on battle tactics. Omoi cleanly decapitated Danzo but took a strike to the chest in return. Both bodies fell to the ground, but Danzo's disappeared as another Sharinganai closed from underneath his sleeves. Simui had shouted a warning to Omoi, but either he had disregarded it or hadn't heard. Simui saw both of her trusted companions slain before this seemingly unstoppable enemy. "How are you doing this? I'm not in a genjutsu." "How?" Danzo titled his head slightly. Like Kakashi, he wasn't a fool. He would not be explaining his kinjutsu to her. "You don't really expect me to answer that, do you?" Simui narrowed her eyes and rushed in with a headlong charge. Her chakra, however, was already gathered and she performed a hand seal free kawarimi right before they clashed. She replaced herself with Omoi's katana that was only a foot away from Danzo and rushed in close. Her arm grabbed Danzo's sword arm and her tanto stabbed into his gut. Danzo's free hand revealed a kunai fused with wind energy and he used it to stab at Simui, who blocked the hand with the elbow of the hand that wielded the tanto. She spun away from Danzo and watched as yet again he faded from view and reappeared utterly unharmed. The elderly Leaf Nin was annoyed. He had failed to do any harm and the exchange had cost him a third Sharinganai. Information was his forte and he knew Simui had a strong if short mission record. It was likely he was facing Kumo's fourth strongest shinobi behind the Reikage, Killer Bee and Darui. The Kenjutsu duel was not going as well as he had hoped, but he had 2 more tricks yet to play. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.